Welcome to the amazing Top YouTube channel. On this channel, we're uploading the Top Facts video every Monday. Let's get started. At long last, Apple finally revealed the new 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pro laptops at its Unleashed event. The new laptop features a new redesign with smaller bezels, a new display, new ports, new Apple Silicon, and more. The M1 Pro and M1X are the newest Apple system on a chip (SoC) following the M1 that was released last year. The M1 is the first ARM architecture chip designed specifically for Macs, and it powers the MacBook Air, the 13-inch MacBook Pro, the Mac Mini, and the 24-inch iMac. In this video, we're going to discuss the latest 2021 M1X M1 Pro MacBook Pro. The video is going to be amazing, so make sure you stick till the end. When Apple announced M1 in November 2020, the company made it clear that while it's more powerful than Intel processors, this chip is focused on laptops and entry-level desktops due to its lower power consumption profile, which is why there are still some Intel Macs available even after the introduction of M1 Max. It's been a long wait, but this fall, Apple's flagship 16-inch MacBook Pro finally gets the Apple M1 Silicon treatment. In addition to ditching Intel processors for Cupertino's own M1 Pro and M1 Max, the biggest of the MacBook Pros gains more input-output ports and a new gorgeous XDR display. Apple just announced the new long-awaited laptop which comes rocking slimmer bezels, a return to legacy ports, and Apple's new M1 Pro and M1 Max. An update from Dylan DKT on Twitter talks about the M1X MacBook Pro touting the same performance irrespective if you purchase the 14-inch and 16-inch variants. Since both sizes will feature the same M1X processor, the performance gains are bound to be similar unless Apple decides otherwise. The current 16-inch MacBook Pro features Intel's powerful chips with better thermals compared to the 13-inch model. It's a great option for users who opt for a smaller size but don't want to compromise on the performance. However, the M1X MacBook Pro might see a price increase according to the leaker. The new 14-inch MacBook Pro starts at $1,999 and the new 16-inch MacBook Pro starts at $2,499. If you don't need the power of these high-end MacBooks nor the budget, you can spend less on the M1-powered MacBook Air or 13-inch MacBook Pro. The MacBook Air starts at $999 and the 13-inch MacBook Pro starts at $1,299. There are a couple of ways to grab either at a discount. M1 Pro delivers up to 32GB of unified RAM and incredibly fast memory bandwidth, which should make it extremely powerful, especially when combined with a 10-core design. These new chips should be available soon though, we're still not sure which laptops will be supported right now. Although Apple is claiming that the Apple M1 Pro along with the more powerful Apple M1 Max will be the most powerful chips for Pro laptops, we'll have to put that to the test, but it's looking promising. The base configuration 16-inch MacBook Pro is $100 more expensive than its predecessor, and prices increase steeply when you add the M1X processor option along with extraordinary amounts of memory up to 64GB and storage up to 8TB that Apple offers. What's more, nearly all of the standard and optional features of the 16-inch MacBook Pro are also available on the smaller 14-inch model at a lower price. If you're looking for a more affordable Apple Silicon MacBook Pro, there's the M1 MacBook Air, which sports the same processor as the M1 MacBook Pro, a 13.3-inch display, Touch ID, and ports, as well as most other hardware features for a price starting at $999. For casual users, this means that the additional $300 to get the M1 MacBook Pro may be difficult to justify. It's a more consumer-oriented and slightly less capable machine compared to the MacBook Pro, but it's more than adequate for most users. So your choice really comes down to size, weight, and price. If you can stomach spending a lot of extra dough and carrying around a significantly bulkier and heavier chassis for 2 additional inches of screen real estate, the 16-incher is a no-brainer. But if you're like many pros looking for a blend of portability and power, we suspect that these compromises might turn you off, especially if you've already got an external monitor at home or the office to do most of your multitasking and other tasks that requires big screens. In terms of the display, the new 16-inch MacBook Pro has a 16.2-inch display in a boasting 3456 into 2234 resolution compared to 3072 into 1920 of its predecessor. There's also space for memory than with the Apple M1, which is good. Right now, you can only get up to 16GB of RAM on the M1. That's fine for most casual users, but creative professionals need way more memory. Luckily, the M1 Pro will support up to 32GB of unified memory, and the M1 Max will support up to 64GB. That does mean we're unlikely to see that the M1 Max in the Mac Pro, but it's gonna be more than enough for most professionals using apps like Final Cut and Blender to get their work done. More memory is only half of the story though. Apple has also boosted memory bandwidth, and by a lot, the Apple M1 Pro boasts up to 200GB per second of memory bandwidth, another important spec for creative users. Apple also shrank the bezels, making the sides 24% thinner and the top a whopping 60% slimmer. If that wasn't enough, the panel is capable of a 120Hz refresh rate and supports up to 1 billion colors. The Apple M1 was such an incredible processor because it was able to do some high-performance computing without consuming too much power, which meant it led to some incredible battery life, and it looks like Apple is trying to bring that same design idea to the 16-inch MacBook Pro. This time, the Apple M1 Pro is a 10-core chip, but while that's just 2 more cores than the original Apple M1, it's double the amount of high-performance cores. The M1 Pro has 8 high-performance cores and 2 efficiency cores compared to the 4 high-performance cores and 4 efficiency cores in the original chip. That means that the M1 Pro is going to be way faster than the M1, but we might start to see battery life start to take a loss, but we'd expect that with a larger chip either way. The GPU is also getting a huge bump. In the Apple M1 Pro, you're getting 2,048 execution units (EUs), which is a massive increase over the 128 EUs found in the original M1. But because Apple is putting so much focus into power efficiency, Apple found a way to put this in a GPU that apparently only peaks at around 30 watt, but is exponentially faster than what's found in the integrated GPUs you'd find in an Intel processor. The Apple M1X will have a much powerful GPU. It'll include 32 cores, which means you get up to 4,096 EUs. However, it's a bit harder to figure out exactly what the specs would look like. We're sure it's going to be clocked much higher because Apple's own graphs indicate that it'll use up to 50 watts of power, but while reaching nearly the same level of performance as a top-end laptop graphic card and an MSI GE76 Raider. It's not often that input and output ports become a headlining feature on a laptop, but it's certainly the case with the new MacBook Pro. 5 years ago, Apple ditched most of the ports on its laptops, doubling down on USB-C Thunderbolt. The internet complained endlessly, with reviewers and commenters complaining that laptops need more than just one type of port, yet Apple persisted until this generation of Pro. Of course, USB-C is versatile depending on how it's implemented. It can do battery charging, display output, even 40 gigabits per second Thunderbolt transfers to external drives. But professional users with complicated setups of peripherals simply need more I/O variety, and Apple has restored that variety with the new MacBook Pro. A dedicated HDMI output is back for connecting external monitors without an adapter cable or dongle, and the SD card reader also makes a welcome reappearance. Overall, the 13-inch MacBook Pro is the best option for normal consumers. The 13-inch MacBook Pro is actually more akin to a MacBook Air than its high-end siblings, being more than good enough for the needs of casual users. It's lighter, smaller, and more portable than the 14-inch MacBook Pro. Professionals who require larger and more accurate displays, additional ports, more memory and storage, hardware acceleration for media, and a very high level of performance should look to the 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pro. These high-end MacBook Pros are not targeted at everyday consumers, being clearly tailored for creatives and professionals who rely heavily on the capabilities of their machines. This was all for today. Hope you liked the video. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit the bell icon for more updates and notifications. Stay safe, and we'll be back soon with another video.